This is the beach right here where we laid my dad's ashes to rest after he died from falling overboard, not too far from here. We did quite a bit of racing, including things like Swiftshires, Van Isle 360s, and as a requirement for those kinds of races, you have to do all kinds of man overboard drills, which we did. We had all the safety equipment on our boat. We could quick stop under spinnaker really well. We practiced that all the time. We would put a crew member in a survival suit and he would hop overboard. We would be under spinnaker, we'd stop the boat, go and retrieve him. So we were really well versed in practicing person overboard drills. And it was really interesting to see when we came upon real person overboard drills that things were quite different. So our first man overboard situation was right out here on this bay. There were some fishermen out there fishing crab, and it was in the middle of winter. The wind was blowing about 25 knots straight into the bay, and they decided this would be a good time to go out and get their crab pots. Well, their dinghy swamped, and both of them wound up in the water. So needless to say, this was quite a dangerous situation being in the middle of winter and all. They didn't have life jackets on or PFDs or anything. So the first boat on the scene was a Cal 20 sailboat, a small sailboat. Managed to pull them out of the water, but they were still pretty cold, and the Cal 20 is really not a very big boat. So we heard on the radio that there was a man overboard situation out in the bay here, and we were nearby. So we swung by to help out, and so we took the hypothermic casualties on board our boat and proceeded to try and warm them up. One of them was quite delirious. He was very cold. He was incoherent. He couldn't talk properly. The other one was cold and shivering, but could talk. So we took the coldest of the two casualties and gave him a sail cover to wrap himself up in. Well, he actually couldn't wrap himself up. He was too delirious. So my wife wrapped him up and decided to crawl in with him too and to warm him up with her body heat. So she was warming him up, and I navigated to the nearest marina and we called the ambulance, and we just sort of kept them there at the dock until the ambulance showed up and took them away. So for me, I think the really big learning in that particular man overboard exercise was to always have something around to warm people up in case they fall in the water. We only had a sail cover, but after that I always made sure to keep a wool blanket or one of those thermal plastic space blankets on board. Those are really compact and useful to have. So that was my significant learning from that particular exercise. So with that first person overboard, you could argue that those two fishermen would have been okay had we not come along, because the Cal 20 was there, and the Cal 20 would have taken them in, and they would have been okay. But our second person overboard situation wasn't quite like that. It took place just out here off these islands, and it was a kayaker who was out surfing some big standing waves that day. There was a wind over current situation, and the wind was blowing probably about 20 knots. So not big seas, but big standing waves, and the kayaker was out enjoying them. And he'd come out of his boat and wasn't able to get back into it. And the current was pulling him further and further from shore. Luckily for him, we decided to take a different way home that day. Normally we go in between these two islands over here, and but this day, for some reason, we decided to go around the outside. There was a lot of wood in the water that day because there'd been some really high tides. And so we were keeping a really close lookout for logs. And anyways, one of these logs was white. And we thought, this isn't right. There shouldn't be any white logs out here. So we went downstairs and got the binoculars, and sure enough, there was a little black dot right next to this white log, and we thought, well, that doesn't look good. Maybe that's a head. So we kept on going and thought, well, let's go check out this white log. And the closer and closer we got, we realized, well, we could see for sure that it was a kayak upside down with a person in it. And then he shot off a flare, and then we knew, okay, yeah, this is the real deal here. Someone's in trouble here. And so we took down our sails and motored towards the kayak. And as we got closer and closer to the kayak, we deployed our LifeSling, which is this guy here. It's a horseshoe on a line. We deployed the LifeSling and went to circle around the kayaker like you're supposed to do. And but of course the kayaker, he wasn't going to have any of that. He as far as he was concerned, he was going to die, and so he started swimming frantically towards the boat, whereas you're actually supposed to circle around the person in the water. They're supposed to grab the LifeSling and then you pull them into you. Well, no, he was swimming frantically towards the boat and started pulling himself arm over arm up the line that the LifeSling was attached to. So we just stopped the boat, and he came to the transom of the boat, and we have a walk-through transom on that boat. And the waves were small enough that we could just pull him on board through the transom. If the waves are too big, you can't do that. You have to do it amidship, otherwise you'll crush the person with the waves in the stern of the boat going up and down. But anyways, luckily for him, we could just pull him right on board through the transom. And so anyways, we had him on board, and we were all attending to him, seeing how he was, asking him questions, and but we weren't paying attention, actually. The motor was still running, the propeller was still spinning, and we sucked the LifeSling into the propeller. So of course this is entirely suboptimal. Now we've got a person overboard who's hypothermic, and we have a LifeSling around our propeller. In any case, the kayaker was on board. So I went and asked the kayaker, I said, okay, look, here you are on board. We gave him some blankets because we learned from the previous man overboard that we need to have blankets on board. So we gave him some blankets and we said, look, here's the situation. We can sail back to the dock right now, or I can put on my wetsuit and my flippers, which I kept on board, and I can clear the LifeSling, and then we can go and get your kayak. What would you prefer? He said, oh, it's quite an expensive kayak. I'd really appreciate it if you could get the kayak for me. And so we did. I put on my my wetsuit, my mask, snorkel, flippers, and jumped in the water. So here we are about 3 miles from land. I'm in the water with a knife, mask, snorkel, fins, and I dive under the boat. And sure enough, the LifeSling is wrapped around the propeller, and it's also wrapped around the rudder. So I tell the crew on board, I holler up to them, I say, hey guys, straighten out the rudder, please. So they straighten out the rudder, and the boat just took off, like just with the pressure of the wind on the bare poles. It just took off. Anyways, I'm like, turn. So they turn the rudder again, and the boat stops. I caught up to it wearing flippers, but man, that was a little bit scary. The boat took off like that. Anyways, I took my knife, dove under there, was slicing the LifeSling line, got the LifeSling line free, and climbed back on board. And then we started looking for this kayak. So we did a search pattern, basically a back and forth square search pattern. Found the kayak, got the kayak back on board, and so now we had the kayaker and his kayak. Never found his paddle. He was nice enough to take us for drinks after that, and thanked us for saving his life. That was an interesting day. So anyways, key lessons learned from that are, you can do all your drills. We had done the LifeSling drill before, but when someone thinks they're going to die, they don't care, and they may not have even been with you in the drill. They might just be some random person that you've encountered, just like the fishermen. They were, we'd never met them before. They'd never been part of our drills. The kayaker had never been part of our drills. So here we are. The only people we've ever encountered in the water were people that haven't been part of our drills. And so, being flexible, open to whatever the situation throws at you. We didn't expect to encounter the LifeSling line around the propeller, but thankfully I had the wetsuit and the mask and the snorkel and the flippers on board, so I was able to clear that. So anyways, that was a really interesting and I suppose rewarding experience to save that kayaker. The third person overboard that I encountered, and the one that didn't end so well, was my dad. And we were actually right here at the dock, filtering some diesel fuel because I'd been out, just gotten back from a longer trip. I went out to Swiftsure Bank with some friends as a Swiftsure practice run, and on the way back we encountered some rough seas and stirred up some sediment in the fuel tank, and so my dad and I were doing a bit of a fuel polishing exercise. And he said to me, he said, "Gary, I'm going to faint." And with that, he just fell overboard, and he fell right in the water, right here. And I thought, well, it was a bit surprising. It was just like, Gary, hand me that rag. Gary, I'm going to faint. So poof, he was in the water, and I couldn't reach him from the boat. Thankfully, we were at the dock, and so what I did is I reached out. I was on my belly, and I reached and I grabbed his foot, and I pulled his foot towards me, and then I got my arms under his arms, and I was able to hold his head out of the water, but I could see pretty quickly that he wasn't breathing. So I thought, okay, this isn't going to work. I was just kind of hoping that he would come to, but he didn't. He wasn't breathing, so I had to get him out of the water. But because we were working with diesel fuel, and he was just wearing a t-shirt and a pair of shorts because we were at the dock, he was slippery. I tried everything that I could to get him out of the water. I tried, I grabbed his arms and pulled him, and his arms were slippery, and he was a pretty big guy. He was about 220 pounds. The issue wasn't that he was too heavy, it's just that I had nothing to grab onto. So I tried pulling his arms, and my arms just slid up his arms. It was the most frustrating thing, and I spent, I don't know how long I spent trying to get him out of the water. And it was right here. The freeboard is, maybe 18 inches. Eventually what I came up with to get him out of the water was I basically put him back face down in the water and reached into the water and grabbed him by the khakis. His shorts were like khaki shorts. Grabbed him by the shorts and pulled him up onto the dock. And then once I got him on the dock, rolled him on his back, started doing CPR on him. And I could tell with the CPR that there wasn't really any water in his lungs. Flipped him up onto his side, did the mouth sweep, put him back on his back, did more CPR. Didn't take long before some more people came and took over the CPR, which was nice. So I only had to do CPR for probably 5 minutes on my own. And the fire department isn't too far from here either. So the fire department arrived, and they took over and did the CPR as well. And so I called my mom and said, hey, Dad's unconscious. He's on the dock. They're doing CPR on him. I don't know what's going to happen. I'll call you when we get to the hospital. So I didn't know which hospital they were going to take us to. Anyways, they keep doing CPR on the dock. They hook up one of those AEDs to him. automatic defibrillators, and it didn't get any signal. So I knew enough that those AEDs only work if the heart is working partly, but his heart wasn't working at all. Some more ambulance attendants came with some more complicated equipment. They hooked him up to another defibrillator. Nothing. And so they continued to do CPR on him right here on the dock for probably about 20 minutes. And then they pulled me aside and said, Gary, this isn't looking good. Like, we've been doing everything we can here for the last 20 minutes, and he's still he's not responding. Normally, if someone's going to come back, they respond by now. And so they stopped doing the CPR, and he was hooked up to oxygen too. And it was amazing. Like within seconds of them stopping, his skin went from being like this pink alive color, even though his heart wasn't beating, to like ghostly gray. Like within seconds, his skin turned gray. It was really something to see. So they packed him up and took him away. And I went back on board the boat and saw his keys and his wallet lying there, and his watch, just as though he would pick them up and go home. And I just broke down. It was pretty surreal that he just left his keys and his wallet there as though he was going to go home, and he never did go home. To me, the big learning in that was, it's just, if somebody's unconscious, it's almost impossible to get them out of the water, especially by yourself. Here I was at the dock, and if I had been out at sea, there's no way I could have gotten him back on board. So having a vest like this with an integral harness and a crotch strap is really, really important, in my opinion. Even as a handle for your friends to pull you out of the water if you fall overboard. I can't stress enough the importance of a harness with a crotch strap. Even if you can swim, it doesn't matter. But if you're unconscious and in the water and not at the dock, it's virtually impossible, I think, to get somebody back on the boat. So after they took Dad away, I was interviewed by the police several times. The coroner came down, because this is kind of unusual. Man falls overboard. Son is the only person there. And anyways, for the next 2 days, I just replayed this scenario over and over again in my head. It was one of the strangest 2 days I've ever had. Thankfully, a couple of days later, the coroner called me and said, Gary, we figured out why your dad died. He had an aortic dissection, which is the main artery out of the heart, burst, and it would have been sort of decisively fatal, regardless of whether he'd even been in the hospital at the time. So I felt a little bit better about my procedure, but it was really an eye-opening exercise to see just how hard it is to get somebody out of the water when they're unconscious. I could barely get my dad out of the water onto a relatively low dock when it was dead calm. What if it was blowing like this and we were out in the boat? It would be virtually impossible to get anybody back on board, even if they were fully conscious. Here we are in 30 to 35 knots of wind in Johnstone Strait, just after the start of one of the Van Isle 360 legs. About half an hour before the start, one of the other boats lost a $10,000 racing sail overboard because they didn't lash it down properly. We were right behind them and the first boat on the scene. Even with some of the best local sailors on board, we were only able to manage 2 attempts to retrieve the sail before it disappeared between the waves, never to be seen again. You really don't want anybody to fall overboard in these conditions. The ocean might as well be boiling lava. The other problem, in addition to getting somebody back on board, is finding them in the first place. We were in a Swiftsure and we lost an orange sweatshirt overboard. I know it sounds silly, but we thought the race was over, and so we went back to get the orange sweatshirt halfway across the Strait of Juan de Fuca, and we never found the orange sweatshirt. I took my eyes off it for like a second, and the waves weren't all that big. It was like 1 meter swell, and we never found it again. So it's really important to carry something like this, something like a DanBuoy that you can just chuck overboard, and it will inflate and it'll give the person overboard something to grab onto. Plus it sticks up above the waves, it's got a light on it, and it gives you at least half a chance of finding them. And hopefully they're conscious and they can help you get them back on board. If you like this video, leave a thumbs up, leave any comments about your experiences in the comments field below. Consider subscribing to my channel, and thanks so much for watching. Bye for now.